I think the essence of it has not changed. It's the history, the presence of the people who I feel were here. I'm just captivated by its essence.
Today we're going to explore an amazing marble mansion situated on Afton Mountain in Nelson County. Built over a century ago, this aging ornate estate is part history, part art, opulence, and philosophy, and 100% fascinating. Join us as we visit Swannanoa Palace. Come on.
So we're going to go into the main dining, and you have a D for Dooley, and all the carving. You have the cornucopia for plenty. The one thing about this villa is that they were the first house in Nelson County to have hot and cold running water. And in addition, they had their own power plant where they had electricity as well.
So Sandy, you're the director of events here at Swannanoa, and your husband Phil's family owns the property. Tell us, why was Swannanoa built in the first place?
Okay. In 1911, the Dooleys were familiar with the area because Mrs. Dooley, as a child, spent many times with her married sisters in Stanton. Mm-hmm. So they bought the property in 1911 with the idea to build a summer home for primarily Mrs. Dooley and Mr. Dooley on occasion, because he's working a lot as an attorney.
And that's fascinating, because what is the size of this home, this summer home?
It's about 52,000 square feet.
And they also had Maymont Estate in Richmond.
Yes, that was their main home.
And so why was it called Swannanoa?
Well, we have some theories. Mrs. Dooley loved swans, and one of her reasons were that they mated for life. And I often wonder if they went to the Biltmore and stayed at some point, because there is a Swannanoa River nearby. There's a little town called Swannanoa, just northeast of Asheville, and thus the name Swannanoa.
Well, talk about what went into building this home, this estate. I mean, from the marble to all of the fabulous woodwork. Tell me a little about it.
Well, in 1911, they purchased the property from J.B. Yount's grandfather, who lived in Waynesboro, and it was a farm. So what was amazing is how quickly it was built. The marble on the outside came from Georgia in the United States. Okay. It would have come by railroad and come to the base of Afton Mountain and would have been brought up by oxen cart. The outside was finished in 1912, and then they started on the inside, and all the marble inside came from Italy. And so, same thing.
And there is so much marble. I mean, this whole house is marble. And then talk about the stained glass.
Well, the stained glass is a Tiffany, and it's the largest installation in a house in the United States. It depicts Sally Mae in her garden with all her favorite flowers.
And there's so much attention to detail, the railing and the woodwork. And how many artisans worked on the property?
Inside, 300 artisans worked in every room, speaking different languages, because you have artisans from Asian Indian, and they would have done the Persian room. And then you had artisans doing all the carving in the library and in the dining room as well. And the mantels were carved.
And all of the painting.
The frescoes.
Oh my goodness.
The frescoes are all original. The one in the dome depicts Sally Mae being in her little chariot, being pulled by cherubs. And so, unfortunately, in the main hall, the murals were painted over, and we think it might have happened when it was left to Mr. Dooley's sisters, one who was a nun, who I think thought they were going to have a nunnery here, and they spackled over all the frescoes in this room.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the history of Swannanoa.
Okay.
So the Dooleys had it. They were here for about 10 years, right?
Yes. Mr. Dooley didn't live past 9 years after it was built. They were up in age when they built this.
And Sally Mae died here, correct?
Yes, she did, a few years later. He bequeathed it to his two sisters, who pretty quickly knew they couldn't really afford to be here, and it was too ornate, especially for a nun.
Right.
And so they sold it to a group of businessmen.
Okay.
And so they put in a golf course. They subdivided all the lots, but they didn't foresee the Great Depression coming.
Right.
And so in 1932, the country club went bankrupt and left the mountain in 1932. The house stayed empty for 12 years, from 1932 to 1944. And I hear tales of the old folks in Waynesboro talk about roller skating on the first floor. They talk about having prom parties here after prom.
Oh my goodness.
They talk about animals coming in and out. So it was open to the elements for 12 years.
And then what happened?
Then in 1944, my husband's grandfather came along. He was a businessman in Charlottesville. Got a group of 7 more businessmen he knew together, and they pulled their money together to buy the 600 acres, which included Swannanoa. Now, they weren't sure what they were going to do with Swannanoa.
Right.
So the house sat empty for another 4 years, and along came the Russells. And they had seen it earlier, but Leo liked to say she had a vision. And so they arrived around 1949. And their organization, the University of Science and Philosophy, rented Swannanoa for 50 years.
For 50 years.
Yes.
Walter Russell had foreseen that there would be some kind of university or institute that would be established in the United States that would teach the essence of their work, the unification of all peoples, teaching divine love, and the genius in every person, which was very much exemplified by Walter Russell. So with their coming here, they completely felt guided. They had looked all over the West Coast, everywhere, throughout, different mountains, and he trusted that this was the place they were supposed to be.
I call this the music room or the ladies' sitting room. You have notes over the fireplace, you have instruments over the door and over every window, and then you have this fireplace, which was carved in Florence in 1910 by a professor.
So when did your husband take over the company in Swannanoa? Skyline Swannanoa Incorporated?
Yes. Well, my husband was in college at UVA in the comm school, and his father passed of lung cancer. So at that time, his uncles came in to run the company, but he wasn't really a businessman. And so the family urged Phil to finish college early. And then he came and started running the company in 1971.
And what were his plans for Swannanoa?
Well, because the Russells were here, he didn't really have any plans for Swannanoa. However, when they left, he knew he needed to do something with the house, and so he started having open houses. He started doing weddings and photo shoots. So now,
renovating, because
yes,
you know, something of this size needs constant care, and it really needed some care. So talk about some of the renovations.
Well, he spent millions of dollars repointing the outside of the marble and having it cleaned on the outside of the house. He had windows and doors replaced and painted back to the color that the Dooleys had, which was brown.
And roof work too, right?
Yes, actually he contacted the same roofing company in Italy that did it for the Dooleys. They were still in business, they still had the records, and so they were able to redo all the tiles because they were numbered and ship them over here to be put on and replaced. So we have the roof replaced And we also had the skylight replaced that was leaking.
And his plans were maybe to do a B&B and more events.
Yes, and so he had at first wanted to make it a bed and breakfast, but he soon found out that was quite an expensive venture because the electricity would have to be updated.
Right.
The water system would have to be updated. He would have to have a sewage plant.
Yeah.
So he did the major things he needed to do to keep the house from leaking and having all those issues.
Yeah, and then the recession hit, and then he has had some serious health issues.
Yes, in March he had a stroke, and he has what's called Mewix aphasia, so he can't speak very well. So now he's at home with me, and he's getting good care now.
Yes, and you're taking care of Swan and Noah.
Yes, I am. I retired from UVA, and it took me a while to gather my composure to know what to do. Because he had all that information, he couldn't speak.
Right.
So what I did is I started having people call me for weddings, for special events, photo shoots. We've had a number of photo shoots this year.
And then tours. So people come in and they have tours. They
Yes.
they don't tour the whole estate.
No.
It's not completely all open, but they
Exactly.
tour quite a bit. And then they have the garden area in the back and the outdoor.
And the water tower in the back that looks like Rapunzel's tower. So
And what do they like most? What do they say when you're giving a tour? What do you think is their favorite part of the house?
they don't zero in on one thing.
Yeah,
They
it's pretty overwhelming.
It is overwhelming to see everything. It's a very solid staircase. It's steel and wood, and as you notice, it does not move after all these years. Now, when the Dooleys were here, the trees were no taller than we are. So they must have had a fantastic view.
I think a lot of us within the University of Science and Philosophy are feeling a major revival of the Russell work. And there's a lot of people who would love to see Swan and Noah open up again as a museum for Walter Russell's work. Historically, I would love to see it completely renovated so that it will be kept intact for the future of our children, and that everyone can appreciate the Gilded Age architecture, and so that it will last, you know, many, many, many more centuries.